Veterans. This is Commander's Comment. The commander of the Sons of Confederate Veterans is here with us today again, and we're going to be talking about Confederate diversity. After all, February is the month that we in the Sons of Confederate Veterans have set aside to celebrate the great diversity of the South. Commander Gramling, good to see you again.
You as well, Donnie. It's always good to get back with you on these comments.
Good, good. Listen, before we really get into that now, the Sons of Confederate Veterans is an international organization, so there is diversity there, is it not?
It is. We have camps in Brazil and South America. Mm-hmm. We have camps in Australia. Mm-hmm. We have camps in the UK. In Germany, in that area, so we have camps all over the globe, and even though it's part of the United States, we even have a camp in Hawaii.
In Hawaii.
So there's we're very diversified when it comes to other countries, and not just in the South.
Right.
And we even had camps up north.
Great.
We have Northerners that are members of the Sons of Confederate Veterans.
Americans, you know, we're pretty mobile. We're spread all over the country, so it's understandable that Southerners would be in, say, Oregon.
We have in Oregon,
Maine,
Washington, California. We have 12 camps in California alone.
How many Americans do you think have Southern roots or Confederate ancestry, do you think?
It's been estimated there's anywhere from 70 to 75 million descendants of Confederate veterans.
Wow, that's a large number. Okay, well, good, Commander. We'll get into that more. Tell us briefly about any upcoming major events that the Sons of Confederate Veterans going to be having here.
There's a national event that I have proclaimed as a national event. It's taking place in Stone Mountain, Georgia. It's going to be April 6th at the front of the carvings there at the Stone Mountain Park. We have not had a national event in 5 years, almost 5 years, and I believe it's time to have a national event to bring Southerners together, people of like minds. And we're going to do this at Stone Mountain Park, April 6th. It begins at 12 o'clock noon. We'll have a gospel band playing there, and then we'll have a couple of speeches. But basically, it's a time for Southerners to come together and show their support for everything Confederate symbols, monuments, flags, everything. And this will be a meeting place and just to have a good time just being there.
Right. And as you said, it's time for us to come together as Southerners, but as we always try to remind people in the Sons of Confederate Veterans, we are defending traditional American values and American heritage, and so that's great. Commander, we're going to move on into our segment here now with the talking about the great diversity in the South. And I'd like to ask some questions and talk to you about the African American contribution to the Confederacy.
There's several blacks that fought for the South. Now I know there's an argument out there that the blacks did not fight, and those that probably did were made to fight, forced to be there. But if you look at some of the pictures of the reunions, the UCV reunions after the war, there were several blacks there in reunions with their white counterparts.
Exactly.
And these gentlemen are wearing medals, the reunion medals.
Yeah.
So that kind of blows the argument, if you will, that they were forced to fight when after the war they gladly went to these reunions to see their comrades in arms.
You know, you're bringing up a point here that I always like to remind people, especially when we're dealing with the slaves that fought for the Confederacy. People will say, well, you're acting like they love slavery. No, the slaves never liked slavery. No one would, in their right mind, would like slavery. But the point is, they never hated their white neighbors.
Correct, which is why when the white masters or the people that owned the slaves had gone off to war, the slaves that stayed behind and took care of the home. They took care of the land. They took care of everything while the masters were gone to fight. But in some cases, they went with their masters to fight.
Yes. Well, you know, I was reading in the slave narratives, which was done in the 1930s, of the last of the surviving slaves, and the federal government did a narrative getting the information from the slaves themselves, how they felt about their masters and being a slave, etc. And one of the questions they asked the former slaves is, well, with all the white young people gone, young men of military age gone, why didn't y'all just rise up, kill the plantation owners, and be free? And the slaves would always say, well, we would just as soon strike our own people as strike our white neighbors and friends. And the point is, again, they didn't like slavery, but it was not the racial hatred there. If it had been, the war wouldn't have lasted 9 months.
They were all family.
Exactly.
They were family, and which is, again, why a lot of the blacks went off to war, was because I'd done an interview, a radio show several years ago, and that question was called in: why did the blacks fight for the Confederacy? Yeah. And I said, well, they fighting for the same reason that the whites were fighting. It was protect their land,
protect their land,
protect their home.
That's right.
And that's, in a nutshell, that's why they were fighting.
Paul, have you know of any people that such as Levi Corn? Can you tell us a little bit about him? Because he was a slave from Louisiana, and he fought, did he not?
He did. He went to Virginia, I believe, with his master, and fighting up there with a regiment up there. His master was killed in battle, and from what I understand, he continued to fight. He stayed with the unit and the regiment there in Virginia and continued to fight after the war. Then when he came home to Mansfield, Louisiana, which is not far from where I live, he spent the rest of his life there. And when he died, they was going to bury him in the city cemetery, but a lot of the white people there did not want the black man, buried in a white cemetery. But the Confederate veterans that he fought with came to his aid, if you will, and they demanded that he be buried with the rest of the Confederate soldiers there.
And if I understand correctly, correct me if I'm wrong here, the Richard Taylor camp is one of the camps that takes care of that cemetery, and they take care of the Confederate veterans, black and white.
Exactly.
And again, this points to the fact that there was a comradeship there. There was not hatred there.
Correct.
That hatred was introduced in the South after the war.
Which is why you have so many of them going to the reunions.
That's correct. Absolutely. Oh, we could go on all day on this. I would like to cover the subject of Hope Collier, because on our Make Dixie Great Again website, we've got a video that was done about Hope Collier, and I'm sure you've seen it. Hope Collier was a free man of color, and anyone who has a child with a teddy bear needs to thank Hope Collier, a black Confederate veteran, because he was the one that was responsible with Teddy Roosevelt getting the teddy bear deal going. Yeah. But he was a free man of color that when the war broke out, he joined a Texas unit up in Memphis, Tennessee, and stayed with the Texas unit and became a sharpshooter, one of the best sharpshooters. And this kind of reminds me of the fact that how did all these black people know how to shoot weapons if they didn't have weapons down south? The old story is, they didn't know anything about guns because the master wouldn't dare let them. Oh yes, they had guns, so they became great hunters, and Hope Collier was one of the best.
And you talk about the free men of color, there were several blacks in the Cane River area, which is north of Alexandria around Clucherville. There were several blacks
in Louisiana,
that free men of color in that area went and fought for the Confederacy as well. Matter of fact, I used to work with a gentleman at the post office. He is a descendant of some of those blacks from the Cane River area that fought for the Confederacy.
One of you mentioned that Gary Mills, Dr. Gary Mills, the late Dr. Gary Mills, wrote a book called The Forgotten People, which speaks to that of the free people of color in the Cane River area. And one of the things that he points out is that these people owned big plantations. They owned a lot of slaves. They were rich, very prosperous people, and they were some of the people that was the most dedicated defenders of the Confederacy in that area. And that hits two things that people just don't understand: slavery, cross racial lines. It wasn't white people owning black people. It was people owning people.
Right.
And also that they were rich plantation owners, and they fought for the Confederacy, and it was just an interesting situation.
Well, like we've said several times before, you know, the Confederate Army was probably one of the first armies that was diverse and multicultural.
Absolutely.
Armies.
Very racially integrated army. And one soldier that I read an account of, and I do not know where he was from, I think North Carolina, he noted that when you would sleep at night, you never knew, because the soldiers would come in and they'd share a big blanket for everybody. So you'd wake up with a black man on one side of you and a white man on the other. We never thought anything of it.
Correct.
And after the war, it became a racial issue, but before that time, it was not the hatred. Now, I'm not trying to say it was moonlight and magnolias,
Right.
everything was perfect. The world is full of sin and hatred. We all understand that. But there's a different story to be told about diversity, especially the black and white diversity in the South.
And, you know, people need to understand the black, white, Asians, you know, Hispanic, they were all brothers and comrades in arms.
Correct.
And one meant just as much as the other did.
Absolutely.
You know.
And the point that you made about after the war, these blacks, they were part of the United Confederate Veterans. They were respected members. They were accepted. There was no bitterness and hatred there, and that is something that we need to emulate today in our society.
And that's one of the main things when I speak to groups, and I spoke to black ministers, and this subject comes up, and I will show them a picture, or several pictures of black Confederates that fought, and when they went to their reunions afterwards, I let those black ministers know that I honor these men just as much as I honor my own ancestors that fought.
Absolutely.
You know, they're all the same. They all fought for the same reason, you know, for a noble cause. And they do great disservice to these men when they don't acknowledge what they did.
As we always say, though, that flag and these memorials is to all Confederates, not just white
Correct.
Confederates. And Commander, we're running up on time, and I think we're going to close this out, and we'll be coming back shortly with another interview and conversation about the Hispanic and Native American contribution and diversity in the Confederacy. And we look forward to seeing you in the next go-around.
Friends, I have 2 points to bring out from this edition of Commander's Comments. One, you heard Commander Gramling proclaim a national rally at Stone Mountain Park near Atlanta, Georgia, to be held on April the 6th, 2019, beginning at noontime. Please make plans now to attend. Need I remind you that the left is constantly working to destroy the Confederate monument at the park. A huge rally would send a great message to all of America that the monument should be preserved, respected, and supported. On the other hand, a poorly attended rally would send just the opposite message. In the January 14, 2019 edition of the Clarion Ledger from Jackson, Mississippi, we find this headline on the front page: Groups using Super Bowl to push against Confederate statues. Various left-wing groups are coming together to kick off a renewed war on the Confederacy and to promote a broad leftist agenda that includes the removal of all Confederate monuments in America. Specifically, the monument at Stone Mountain is a target. Note the leftists are declaring war. That's their words. Folks, if the people of the South fail to defend themselves from evil when it threatens, we lose everything. Our monuments, our heritage, our freedom, and even our lives, because the left won't stop until we stop them. Put the April 6th rally on your calendar. Download the promotional flyer, makedixiegreatagain.org, and post it on your website, share it through social media, email it far and wide, and make printed copies to pass out to everyone you can. Now, for my second point, Black people with ancestors who served in the Confederate military or who stayed home to take care of the farms and the families of soldiers who went off to war have much to be proud of. The left would deprive you of that noble heritage, but the Sons of Confederate Veterans does not. If you're a black person who honors your Old South heritage, we invite you to join us in the SCV and the campaign to make Dixie great again. We have genealogists who can help you find your ancestors so you can join the SCV. But remember that you don't have to join to be a member of the Sons to join the campaign to make Dixie great again. In closing, I'll remind you that this is part 1 of a 3-part series on the diversity of the Old South. If you enjoyed part 1, you'll enjoy parts 2 and 3 as well when they're available, which will be very soon. I'm S. Ross Aldridge. Thanks for watching the February 2019 edition of Commander's Comments. Until next time, Dio Vindice.